Welcome to First Parish in Needham, Unitarian Universalist. First Parish is a Unitarian Universalist congregation founded in 1711 along with the town of Needham. We are proud to be certified as a welcoming congregation for our inclusivity of people of all sexual orientations, gender identities, and expressions. As a green sanctuary, for our commitment to addressing the climate crisis, and as a Level 2 sanctuary supporting congregation for our work in immigration reform and anti-deportation efforts. I am Elliot Chakowski. I'm in my second year as Vice President of the congregation. I serve on the Parish Committee and the Membership Committee. I sing with the choir and Betty Singers, and I play with First Parish players and First Parish singers. I have found First Parish to be a supportive community, helping each other in times of need, and providing activities which strengthen my relationship with other members and do good works in the larger community. As you know, what's happening right now at the congregation is very different than usual because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Our building is closed and we are gathering online only, at least through December. Though our building is closed, our community is open. Our First Parish community has become creative about how we can stay in touch and renew our spirits without meeting in person. And we hope you will plug into our Zoom gathering opportunities throughout the week. Whether you are a first-time visitor or a lifelong member, you can learn more about all that's happening at First Parish by going to our website, uuneedham.org, or by following us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. If you're joining us for the first time this Sunday, you can sign up for our weekly email newsletter by going to our website, uuneedham.org, and clicking Get Involved Newsletter, or sending your request by email to office@uuneedham.org. All are welcome to our Zoom social hour after this service. The link is provided in our weekly email newsletter. We know this way of worshiping and gathering together is an adjustment for all of us. However, our sincere hope is that these online services and connection opportunities will help us keep the physical distance required during this pandemic without losing much of the spiritual, emotional, and social closeness that we treasure in our faith community. Welcome again to everyone, and good morning.
As we light our chalice, symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith, we read words from 20th century Euro-American Universalist minister and professor, Reverend Alfred S. Cole. These words are often attributed to 18th century Universalist preacher, Reverend John Murray, but in fact, they are words Reverend Cole wrote to describe the message the time spirit of the era spoke to John Murray. You may recognize them. Give the people, blanketed by a decaying and crumbling Calvinism, something of your new vision. You may possess only a small light, but uncover it, let it shine. Use it in order to bring more light and understanding to the hearts and minds of all. Give them not hell, but hope and courage. Do not push them deeper into their theological despair, but preach the kindness and everlasting love of God.
Hymn number 116, I'm on My Way, was named in honor of Reverend Egbert Ethelred Brown, the first African American to be ordained in the Unitarian tradition in 1912. This hymn is an African American folk hymn and likely would have been a map song, announcing an escape attempt along the Underground Railroad and an invitation for others to join. This hymn was arranged by Mary Allen Walden, the former music director of the Second Unitarian Church of Chicago. Please join us in singing from home hymn number 116, I'm on My Way. We will be led by Kristen Carney.
I'm on my way to the freedom land. I'm on my way to the freedom land. I'm on my way to the freedom land. I'm on my way, great God, I'm on my way. I asked my sister, come and go with me. I asked my sister, come and go with me. I asked my sister, come and go with me. I'm on my way, great God, I'm on my way. I asked my brother, come and go with me. I asked my brother, come and go with me. I asked my brother, come and go with me. I'm on my way, great God, I'm on my way. If they say no, I'll go anyhow. If they say no, I'll go anyhow. If they say no, I'll go anyhow. I'm on my way, great God, I'm on my way. I'm on my way, and I won't turn back. I'm on my way, and I won't turn back. I'm on my way, and I won't turn back. I'm on my way, great God, I'm on my way.
In the Unitarian Universalist tradition, the covenant is a set of promises the membership of a congregation strives to honor with one another and out in the world. Though we cannot gather in person during this time, we strive to live these promises every day. Please say along with me from home the words of our parish covenant as shown on your screen. We gather as a loving community to encourage and comfort one another. We gather as a diverse community to support each other in our search for spiritual truth. We gather as a service community to live our beliefs through action and care for our world.
In a few days, we get to celebrate the 250th anniversary of what many people believe to be the miracle story of the Universalists. The story I'm about to tell you is adapted from the words of Reverend Eric Poza, and the song lyrics are by Reverend Eugene Navius. John Murray was born more than 250 years ago in England. He was very religious and started preaching in different churches. Eventually, he started believing in an idea called universal salvation, that God is a loving deity, and that God wouldn't create a world where people could be predetermined to suffer after they die. Needless to say, universal salvation was not popular back then, and many of John's own friends disagreed with this new idea he was preaching. They made him leave their church and stopped talking to him. Then something very sad happened. His wife and his baby son got very sick, so sick that they died. Some other bad things happened to John after that, so he decided to stop preaching and move away from England and come to America. So in the year 1770, Murray got on a ship called Hand in Hand, that sailed over the ocean heading to New York City. And now here's the super fun part when we're really going to celebrate. We're going to sing together. And this is for everyone, no matter if you are one of our people who's proudly in our choir or someone who says, I only sing in the shower. So grab an instrument or right out of your kitchen. Maybe you can have a shaker with your rice or even with your salt, just to add a little groove. And we're going to sing the John Murray song. Ready? John Murray sailed over the ocean. John Murray sailed over the sea. He just lost his wife and his baby, and he was as sad as could be. Sail on, sail on, sail on, John Murray, sail on, sail on, sail on, sail on, sail on, John Murray, sail on. But the ship had blown off course and got stuck in a bay in southern New Jersey. And the winds changed direction so that Murray's boat could not leave the bay. They were stuck on a sandbar. They needed food, so John Murray went ashore to ask for help from the nearest farmhouse he could find. The ship he was on hit a sandbar. The wind would not let it go free. John Murray got off in New Jersey to see what he could see. Sail on, sail on, sail on, John Murray, sail on, sail on. Sail on, sail on, sail on, John Murray, sail on. When he knocked on the door, John Murray got the biggest surprise of his life. The farmer answered the door and asked John, "Are you the preacher that God has sent to me?" John was shocked. How could this man even know that he had been a preacher? The farmer's name was Thomas Potter, and he did not know about John. But Thomas also was deeply religious. He led discussion groups on religious ideas in his house, and then he built a chapel, a small church building on his farmland. Thomas prayed to God often, asking God to send him a preacher to give sermons there. But not just any kind of sermons, because Thomas Potter also believed in universal salvation, and he wanted a preacher who would talk about that in his sermons. At first, John did not want to preach. He had left England to leave preaching behind him, but Thomas kept begging. So finally, John said that if the winds did not pick up by Sunday, he would preach. On landing, he met Thomas Potter, who owned his own church in a vale, and demanded that Murray preach for him if the wind would not let his ship sail. Preach on, preach on, preach on, John Murray, preach on, preach on, preach on, preach on, preach on, John Murray, preach on. The sailboat stayed in the bay for several days while no wind blew. Finally, on Sunday morning, Thomas invited his neighbors to the chapel, and John Murray preached a Universalist sermon there. Thomas was extremely happy, and John, well, just as everyone was leaving the chapel, a sailor walked up to say the winds had started to blow again, and now they could leave. The wind kept his ship on the sandbar. John Murray was true to his word, with a sermon on godly forgiveness. Universalist teaching was heard. Preach on, preach on, preach on, John Murray, preach on, preach on, preach on, preach on, preach on, John Murray, preach on. But some spark was lit in John Murray, and it inspired him to start preaching in America, which led to him starting the first Universalist church in Gloucester 9 years later. Let's close with a quote from John Murray himself. You may only possess a small light, but uncover it. Let it shine. Use it in order to bring more light and understanding into the hearts and minds of men and women. Give them not hell, but hope.
It is now time to share with one another our joys and concerns from the past week. These joys and concerns were submitted to me at internminister@uuneedham.org by the Thursday before the service at midnight. If you did not submit a candle but would like to share with the community this morning, you are invited to enter your message into the chat box. As our services live stream to YouTube, we cannot guarantee that your joys, concerns, sorrows, and milestones will stay within the First Parish community, but you are always welcome to reach out to Reverend Katie, myself, or the Pastoral Care Associate of the Week, whose name was emailed to you in your emailed order of service, for pastoral care or to share more privately. If you're missing hearing each other's voices during this beloved ritual, may this also serve as a reminder to reach out to one another after the service. May this beloved community be sustained by your creativity and your care for one another during this time. Our first candle today is a candle of sorrow from Reverend Katie and many others at First Parish at the news of the death of Needham community leader David Summergrad. David was a shining beacon for diversity, equity, and inclusion in Needham and in Boston Metro West, and we hold his grieving family and friends in our hearts this morning. A candle of sorrow from Jenna and the national UUA community at the passing of Alandria Williams, former co-moderator of the Unitarian Universalist Association and beloved Knoxville community activist. Alandria believed so deeply in the promise of our faith to be truly welcoming to all, and had a great gift of connecting people. She will be so greatly missed. Our next candle is a candle of remembrance. Carol Alper is remembering her father, Landon V.B., who died 3 years ago on September 25th, which was also Carol's birthday. The virtual flowers today are in his memory. A candle of joy from Tara Rivard in celebration of the impending expansion of our family. We are expecting a son in the next few weeks. And our final candle this morning is a candle of well wishes from the First Parish community for our beloved music director, Irina Georgieva, as she announces a new position at a church in Jamaica Plain beginning October 19th. We are so grateful for Irina's 6 years of service to First Parish, and while we wish her the very best as she leaves us, we are also sad to see her go. For all the sorrows and all the joys that we still hold in our hearts, and in acknowledging the prayers of our neighbors near and far, we light a final candle. May the peace in this sanctuary be felt too in each of your homes, as we remember that even though apart, we are still deeply connected. Amen. As we gather together this morning, we remember and mourn the now 200,000 lives lost to the coronavirus pandemic in our country alone, not to mention the lives lost around the world to this horrible disease. We recommit ourselves in prayer to dismantling the unjust systems that have caused this pandemic to adversely and disproportionately affect the most vulnerable among us. Persons of color, persons experiencing poverty, persons experiencing homelessness, among so many other marginalized groups. We remember this morning that those same unjust systems have continued to deprive the family and all who have taken up cause with Breonna Taylor of proper justice. As a Kentucky grand jury failed to bring charges against the police officers who killed her. Spirit of life and love, help us to stay with this grief and pain so that we might be in true solidarity. Help to remind us that the full healing of racialized trauma requires the dismantling of these systems. Help us channel our love and our anger, our grief and our despair, our calm and our restlessness toward bending the arc in the right direction. Help us remember that even though apart, we are still deeply connected. Amen. And now please join us in singing from home our centering hymn this morning, We Would Be One. The lyrics and music will appear on your screens.
This congregation has been supported by the volunteered time and treasure of its members and friends since its founding in 1711. In those 300 years, this community has weathered hard times, but we are still here. This is the time in our service when we, the modern stewards of this church, offer to give what we can to build and sustain the congregation and worlds that we envision. This Sunday, our collection will be split 50-50 with the Generic Ministry. Generic Ministry is a Needham-based nonprofit whose volunteers gather, sort, and provide clothing, food, toiletries, blankets, and water to people experiencing homelessness on the streets of Boston. During the pandemic, Generic Ministry has continued to serve its clients, at first by handing out prepackaged clothing items, and now in partnership with Haley House and Park Street Church to distribute needed items individually. First Parish has been a proud supporter of the Generic Ministry since its founding, and we continue our strong support of this wonderful organization. To donate to today's offering, you can use one of three methods. First, for those of you with a smartphone, you can use our Text to Give program. Just text the number 73256, putting in UU Needham space plate space, then the $sign with the amount that you would like to give, all in one message. If you want your money applied to your pledge, please instead text that same number, 73256, with UU Needham space pledge 21 space, then the $sign and the amount that you would like to give. Second, if you'd prefer to mail First Parish a check, please make it out to First Parish in Needham. Put the date of this service in the word collection or pledge FY21 in the memo line, and then mail your check to 23 Dedham Avenue, Needham, Mass. 02492. Third, you can visit our website, uuneedham.org, to make your donation. There is a giving button in the upper right corner with a drop-down menu where you'll find an entry labeled Donate Now. Follow that link and sign into your Realm account where you'll be able to fill in your donation information and choose a recipient fund for its destination, such as plate collection. Thank you for everything you are able to give to help support and sustain this congregation and the vital work of our community partners. Please take these next few moments to give what you can and know that it will be gratefully received.
Guiding light, you shine for me, shine now for all to see, bring home travelers weary. Bring hope to eyes teary. Bring joy to those who need thee. Smiling sweetly down on them. Guiding light, you shine for me, shine now for all to see, shining bright through the night. Shining strong till the dawn. Every day, come what may, smiling sweetly down on them. Guiding light, you shine for me, shine now for all to see, bring home travelers weary. Bring hope to eyes teary, bring joy to those who need thee, smiling sweetly down on them, smiling sweetly down on them.
Our reading this morning comes from our Universalist ancestor, the Euro-American author and feminist Judith Sargent Murray, devoted wife of Reverend John Murray. After her husband's death, Sargent Murray compiled his sermons and concluded his autobiography with a summary of John Murray's theology. Our reading today is an excerpt from that final biographical chapter. While Sargent Murray is considered an early American feminist, we did need to update her language to reflect our modern sensibilities of gender diversity and equality. A law was given, to the complete obedience of which everlasting life was annexed, but no individual member was ever able to fulfill this law. It was only the head and members collectively in their glorious head that was furnished with abilities adequate to a performance of such magnitude. Yea, verily, we do indeed break the divine law in thought, in word, and in deed, and the lip of truth declares one who offends in one point is guilty of all. To make this truth manifest was the great business of our promulgator. He has frequently said he did not believe in universal salvation because he saw the majority of humankind were not saved. But he was a firm believer in universal redemption, because that sacred volume which he steadfastly and unwaveringly believed to be the Word of God assured him the price was paid, and the whole human family was redeemed. After the apocalypse and judgment, the book of life shall be opened, in which every individual of the human family shall be found written, and the ransomed of God shall be declared denizens of that heavenly kingdom, where dwelleth felicity uninterrupted. Such were the leading sentiments of our Universalist, and he was firmly of opinion that the doctrines of the gospel, rightly understood, would teach all, everywhere, to be careful of maintaining good works, to love one another, and in all things to regard the best interests of their neighbors. Here ends our reading.
In Britain in the 1760s, when John Murray lived as an ardent Calvinist Methodist, he was sent as part of a theological intervention to the home of a woman who had been deceived by the writings of John Relly, an English Universalist. Universalism was an enormous departure from the Christianity Murray was practicing at that time. The idea that God intended for all of humanity to share the same eternal destination was radically inclusive for its time. Universalist Christianity declares that no one is beyond forgiveness, redemption, and love. Not the neighbors we don't like, not those who break secular and spiritual laws, not even non-Christians. And in Murray's mind at that time, this was a dangerous philosophy that had to be rooted out of his community. To Murray's surprise, he found the heretical woman's arguments persuasive. That if Jesus had died for all of humanity's sins, that really meant he died for all of humanity, regardless of an individual person's beliefs or behaviors. Murray was a little disturbed with himself that the reasoning made sense to him. Murray and his wife Eliza began reading all they could about Universalism and its English promoter, John Relly, even went to go hear him preach. They were seeking flaws in the logic of Universalist salvation. They failed to do so, and they were converted to Universalist Christianity, and they were then thrown out of their church and their social circles. Thus began a period of devastating personal tragedies for John Murray. As the Unitarian Universalist Dictionary of Biographies describes it, Murray experienced a series of personal losses that drove him to the brink of despair. His only son died in infancy. His wife Eliza also died, and soon after that he learned of the deaths of 4 of his siblings. He was thrown into debtor's prison. Although he was rescued by his brother-in-law and eventually paid his debts, he remained too depressed to engage in the preaching that John Relly urged upon him. At that time, Murray wished to pass through life unheard, unseen, unknown to all, as though I'd never been. In 1770, he resolved to quit his life in the old world and start afresh in the new. And so, as we heard from Roberta in our Time for All Ages, John Murray set out for the English colonies in North America on a ship that somewhat fortuitously became grounded on a sandbar off the coast of New Jersey, where Murray met the eagerly awaiting Thomas Potter. On September 30th, 1770, almost exactly 250 years ago, Murray preached the first known sermon on Universalist Christianity in Potter's Chapel. I know for many of us, the world right now feels wild, unpredictable, and frightening. Between the pandemic, natural disasters, police brutality, personal losses, large and small, and the threat of the unraveling of our democracy. Perhaps it feels strange to focus a sermon and service on our religious history at such a time as this. But Unitarian Universalists across our nation today are reflecting on this spiritual anniversary and what John Murray's journey means for his spiritual descendants today. And I believe that Murray's story has lessons to teach us about how to survive and thrive under adverse conditions. I hope his story can give us not hell, but hope and courage. 3 major themes resonate with me from Murray's story: the importance of religious freedom, the entwined legacies of immigration and colonialism, and the necessity of universal collective liberation. First, as many of you know, both our Universalist and Unitarian ancestors were considered heretical Christians since the early centuries of the consolidated Christian church. On the Universalist side, our spiritual ancestor Origen was an extremely popular church father from his lifetime in the 3rd century through the 7th century. Unfortunately, he theorized in one writing that an all-loving God would never eternally punish anyone. Origen proposed that perhaps human souls were transmigrated, his word for reincarnated, until they had earned their place in heaven. 400 years after his death, this theory got Origen kicked out of circulation, so to speak, with almost all of his writings burned. It wasn't until the 18th century that Universalist Christian theology had a relatively safe foothold anywhere in European communities. This is the environment of religious oppression and orthodox, with a little o, Christian supremacy in which John and Eliza Murray still chose to publicly convert to Universalist Christianity. John's new understanding of himself, his faith narrative, and reality itself was so powerful that even when he went through the horrific losses of his child, spouse, and siblings, he could not renounce Universalism to seek comfort in his former religious community. Our ancestor John Murray experienced the social violence of harsh prejudice and ostracization by his little o Orthodox neighbors. It caused him to fall into deep despair, what today we might recognize as a dangerous depression. The message I carry forward from this part of Murray's story is the impact of societal religious freedom and communal pluralism on the individual. Remembering Murray's story, I can understand better how systemic oppression and personal microaggressions toward my marginalized identities negatively impact me, and how oppression and microaggressions impact my family, friends, and neighbors of other marginalized identities. And Murray's story teaches me what a difference it makes to be welcomed in one's beliefs, or at the very least tolerated. We see the enormous change in John Murray that Thomas Potter's simple act of interest, acceptance, and encouragement inspired. After Murray left Potter, he made his way to Massachusetts, where he became the founder of Universalist Christianity in North America. He even had the stamina in 1786 to challenge the government of Massachusetts for its funding through taxation of standing order Puritan congregations. A bit tongue-in-cheek, we have Murray in part to thank for the fact that the town of Needham no longer sends tax dollars to fund First Parish, our town's former standing order Puritan congregation. Murray's story is a reminder to us of how precious freedom and authenticity are, and though it's a bit of a tired phrase, how crucial it is to remain intolerant of intolerance. Modern universalism encourages us to practice pluralism, offer kindness and curiosity to all, and promote systemic policies of inclusion and welcome. Second, Murray was able to find hope and a new life because he could immigrate. Many of us at First Parish know our immigration histories. Perhaps like my family, your ancestors traveled to this land to seek greater opportunities in a country with greater tolerance than the nations we left behind. Immigration used to be fairly simple for ancestors like mine from Europe. Yes, you had to pay for passage, but my ancestors were able to travel somewhat freely across the Atlantic to start their new life. They left terrible poverty and ineffective governments, and were able to access better education, better social services, and better employment in the United States. Like John Murray, my ancestors were able to thrive after they arrived on the East Coast. The lesson I take from this part of his story is to remember that freedom of movement across national borders saves lives, keeps transnational families and communities together, and can promote strong human rights and appreciation for diversity in the human family. However, of course, Murray's and my ancestors' immigration from Europe is not the only story of the population of these United States. European immigration, especially European Christian immigration to the Americas, is inextricably tied with the colonization and genocide of indigenous peoples, the kidnapping and enslavement of African peoples, and quotas and citizenship laws restricting immigration from non-European nations. We know as a Level 2 sanctuary-supporting congregation that immigration to the United States today is unduly complex and discriminatory, and our treatment of refugees and asylum seekers truly atrocious. The freedom and opportunity John Murray and my family found in the United States was in part built on the oppression of so many other ethnic and religious groups. John Murray's second wife, Judith Sargent, is the embodiment of this conflicting legacy. She was a radical feminist for her time who strongly promoted the theology of universal redemption and a shared heavenly destination for all peoples, a theology she learned from her immigrant husband. Yet, in her childhood, her family held enslaved Africans, and when she was an adult, her father married into a family of wealthy plantation owners in Mississippi, and it was in that enslaver community that Judith spent the last years of her life and was buried. The Murray's Oceanside community in Gloucester, Massachusetts, was strongly tied to the transatlantic slave trade, and, of course, the town would not have existed at all had the Pawtucket indigenous people not been violently ousted from the region. The lesson I take from this part of John Murray's story is that we must be careful as we protect ourselves, our families, and our communities from repression and deprivation, that we do not save ourselves by oppressing another. As 20th century Black lesbian activist and writer Audre Lorde phrased it, as she described living outside the circle of this society's definition of acceptable women, the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. They may allow us temporarily to beat him at his own game, but they will never enable us to bring about genuine change. The dominant culture says there isn't enough for every person to thrive, and that we need to hoard resources and privileges to safeguard ourselves from scarcity. In contrast, modern universalism teaches us that there is an abundance of resources in our congregational and wider communities. There is enough for everyone if we are mindful to treat every individual, family, and identity group with respect and equality. This brings me to the third part of Murray's story and theology that can inspire us today. Our lives, our communities, and our global society can be transformed by the recognition that salvation, liberation, is a collective act. As we heard from Judith Sargent Murray, a law was given, but no individual member was ever able to fulfill this law. It was only the head and the members collectively that was furnished with the abilities adequate to a performance of such magnitude. Though the Murray's faith in universalism was about the hereafter, this was a failure of imagination in an era where a heaven on earth would have seemed an impossibility. Yet Murray's faith that his religious ideals would help all people maintain good works, love one another, and in all things to regard the best interests of their neighbor is a lesson to us today that indeed heaven on earth is possible if we work together. Or at least, heaven on earth is certainly not possible if we don't work together by maintaining our good works, loving one another, and regarding the best interests of our neighbors. As queer Latinx UU minister Reverend Teresa Soto said it, all of us need all of us to make it. We have a shared destiny as an interconnected planet. Yes, the climate disaster fires on the West Coast will send smoke all the way here. Yes, the insulting lack of justice for Breonna Taylor will embolden police misconduct here. Yes, the hypocrisy and cruelty of national politicians will falsely legitimize hypocrisy and cruelty here. And yet, the kindness and care we offer to one another has ripple effects here and there. The advocacy we take for climate justice and a new law enforcement system has positive impacts here and there. Our refusal to bend our universalist values and leave any being behind brings forward everyone here and there. We're in it together, and all of us are needed. Please join me in the spirit of prayer with these words from modern Euro-American UU minister Reverend Lynn Cox. Spirit of life and love, known by many names and yet fully known by none, we give thanks for this time of renewal. We give thanks for the ability to begin again after the disaster, after the tragedy, after the loss, after meeting the challenge set before us. Grant us the courage to continue on the journey, the courage to speak up for the well-being of others and ourselves and the planet. May we forgive each other when our courage falls short, and may we try again. Grant us hearts to love boldly, to embody our faith and our values in living words and deeds. May our hearts open to embrace humility, grace, and reconciliation. Grant us the ability to learn and grow, to let the spirit of love and truth work its transformation upon us and within us. May spiritual ancestors like John Murray and our friends in community today inspire us as we continue on this journey together toward a world transformed by collective love and care. Blessed be, and amen. Our closing hymn, Just as Long as I Have Breath, was written by Unitarian Universalist singer-songwriter Alicia Carpenter. John Edward Giles, who revised the hymn's harmony, was a prolific composer and music director of the Unitarian Universalist congregation in Evanston, Illinois. Giles was one of many young gay men who we lost to the HIV/AIDS epidemic in the late 20th century. Please now join from home in singing Just as Long as I Have Breath. The lyrics and music will appear on your screens. Just as long as I have breath, I must answer yes to life. Though with pain I made my way, still with hope I meet each day. If they ask what I did well, tell them I said yes to life. Just as long as vision lasts, I must answer yes to truth. In my dream and in my dark, always that elusive spark. If they ask what I did well, tell them I said yes to truth. Just as long as my heart beats, I must answer yes to love. Disappointment pierced me through, still I kept on loving you. If they ask what I did best, tell them I said yes to love.
As we close our worship today, you are all invited to stay with us for our Zoom social hour. Please remember to keep a careful eye out for emails from First Parish and follow us on social media so you can keep up with the opportunities for connection for all ages throughout the week during these times of physical isolation. You can sign up for our weekly email by clicking on Subscribe to Newsletter on our website, uuneedham.org. Please remember, if you fall ill or need any pastoral support, to reach out to our ministers, Reverend Katie Scudera and Jenna Crawford, and pastoral care team and caring crew via phone or email. We also encourage all of you strongly to check in with your friends at First Parish and to double check your own contact information in our online Realm directory if you have not done so recently. Please email our office administrator, Susanna Whitman, if you have any questions about using our online directory. We always extinguish our chalice with words promising to carry its flame in our hearts until we are together again, no matter how long it is until we are together again. As we extinguish our chalice today, please join me from home in saying these words written by Unitarian Universalist minister, Reverend Elizabeth Selly-Jones. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, nor the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Take these words adapted from 19th century Universalist circuit riding preacher, Reverend Quillen Shin, with you today as a benediction. From this time forth, friends, let our watchword be, go forward. And all up and down your great rivers and scattered over your broad prairies will be set the beacon lights of our holy faith to light up with hope and joy the coming years. Our service begins when our service ends. Blessed be, and amen.